In 1977, NASA launched a golden record into space. 27 songs to represent all of human civilization. Bach, Beethoven, Chuck Berry, and a drinking song from Georgia. Not the state, the country, a place most people can't find on a map, wedged between Russia and Turkey, smaller than South Carolina, and somehow its three-part harmony was chosen to represent humanity to aliens. That same country invented wine 8,000 years ago, before Egypt had pyramids, before Mesopotamia had writing. A farmer in the Caucasus crushed grapes into a clay pot, buried it in the ground, and waited, not for hours, for months. Humanity's first act of deliberate patience. Georgia has 3.7 million people, its own alphabet, looking like it was designed by a calligrapher on mushrooms, and a feast so elaborate it needs a professional poet just to run the toasts. Let's start with what's on that table. And in Georgia, the table is never, under any circumstances, allowed to be empty. Georgia has a dumpling that comes with instructions. Hinkali, a twisted knot of dough filled with spiced meat and broth. You pick it up by the top, the knob, tilt it slightly, bite a hole, and sip the soup inside. Then eat the rest. But the knob? You don't eat the knob. You leave it on your plate, like a receipt, a little pile of dough tails that tells the table exactly how many you've had. Nobody's counting. Everyone's counting. A good hinkali has at least 18 pleats in the twist. Fewer than that and the cook has explaining to do. More than 28 and now you're just showing off. The broth must stay sealed until your teeth break through. If it leaks during cooking, the dumpling has failed in its only job. But hinkali isn't even the national obsession. That belongs to khachapuri, cheese bread, so central to the economy that Georgia invented a khachapuri index, like the Big Mac index, but for cheese bread. Economists track inflation by how much a khachapuri costs in Tbilisi. Other countries use GDP. Georgia uses bread and cheese. And honestly, it might be more accurate. Georgia measures its economy in cheese bread, but what it buries underground, that's where things get biblical. Every wine country thinks it invented wine. Georgia actually did. 8,000 years ago, someone in the South Caucasus crushed grapes, poured the juice into a large egg-shaped clay vessel called a qvevri, buried it in the ground, sealed the top with beeswax, and walked away. The earth did the rest. Underground temperature stays constant. No electricity, no thermostat, no sommelier, just dirt and time. The qvevri ferments the wine with skins, seeds, and stems still inside, all that golden pigment leaching into the juice. The result is amber wine, deep gold, tannic, tasting like nothing you've had from a bottle with a French label. Georgia has over 500 indigenous grape varieties. France has a few hundred. Most of the world uses about a dozen. The wine cellar, Marani, is the holiest room in a Georgian house. Not the bedroom, not the kitchen, the room with the clay pots in the floor. Babies are blessed there, deals are sealed there, guests are judged there. UNESCO gave the qvevri method intangible heritage status in 2013, which is a nice way of saying the rest of the world finally admitted that a farmer in Georgia figured out wine 8 millennia before anyone else. France can keep the branding. Georgia kept the receipts. Georgia buried its wine and blessed it. But what happens above ground at a Georgian table? That's a performance no country has matched. A Georgian feast isn't dinner. It's a spoken word show with food. The supra. It can last 5 hours, sometimes 8. The table is never allowed to have empty space. Plates get replaced before they're finished. Bread appears like it's being generated by the furniture. But the star of the supra isn't the food. It's the tamada, the toastmaster. The tamada controls the table. Every toast, in order. To God, to Georgia, to peace, to the dead, to the living, to the guests. Each one is a speech, poetic, emotional, funny, sometimes all three in the same breath. You don't just raise your glass, you perform. And when the tamada finishes, you drink the whole thing. Not a sip, the whole glass. Then someone else stands and adds to the toast. It's called alaverdi, a relay race of eloquence with wine as the baton. An ancient bronze figurine found in western Georgia shows a man holding a drinking horn mid-toast. The supra has been running for 3,000 years minimum. The tamada has been giving speeches before Rome existed. In France, they pair wine with cheese. In Georgia, they pair wine with philosophy. And if you can't keep up, you'll be carried home. With love, but carried. The supra asks you to speak, drink, and feel all at once. But the city that hosts most of them, it was founded by a bird that couldn't survive its own bath. King Vakhtang Gorgasali was hunting with his falcon in the 5th century. The bird chased a pheasant into a hot spring, both drowned in the steaming water. Vakhtang went looking for his falcon. He found it there, but first he touched the water, warm, sulfurous, healing. He built a city on that spot, named it Tbilisi, from Tbili, meaning warm. Georgia's capital exists because a king's falcon took a wrong turn into a hot spring. The sulfur baths are still there, underground brick domes in the Abanatubani district, smelling like rotten eggs and healing everything anyway. Pushkin bathed there. Dumas bathed there. For 15 centuries, it's where the city came to soak and scheme. Above the baths, the old town climbs the hill in layers, wooden balconies leaning over narrow streets, grapevines growing out of concrete. On Chiskiti, the city's oldest surviving church, built a generation later by Vakhtang's own son, sits next to a techno club that opened last Thursday. Tbilisi doesn't separate its centuries, it stacks them. A grandmother hangs laundry from a balcony that's older than most countries. Below her, someone is selling churchkella, walnut strings dipped in grape juice and dried until they look like candies made of candy. Tourists call them Georgian Snickers. Georgians just roll their eyes. Tbilisi stacks its centuries on top of each other. But the place Georgia carved into a mountain, that one was meant to stay invisible. In the 12th century, Georgia carved a city into the side of a cliff and hid it. Vardzia, 6,000 rooms, 19 tiers, wine cellars, pharmacies, bakeries, a throne room, all inside a mountain. The only way in was a secret tunnel from the riverbank. Nobody could see it from outside. A full city, invisible. Queen Tamar later expanded it into a fortress big enough to hide tens of thousands of people. The name supposedly comes from a legend. As a child, Tamar got lost inside the caves and called out, "Vardzia, I am here, uncle," her uncle being king at the time. Probably not true, but Georgia has a sense of irony. In 1283, an earthquake sheared off the outer cliff face. The whole complex was exposed. Rooms, tunnels, frescoes, laid bare to the sky like a cross-section of a civilization. And inside the main church, still standing, there's a fresco of Tamar herself. Not a queen, a king. She was officially titled Mepe, the Georgian word for king, because the language simply didn't have a word for a woman running the whole show. So they didn't invent one. They just gave her the one that already existed. Georgia hid a city inside a mountain, but it's the story it couldn't hide, the myth that started Western literature that proves the country was always more than geography. The Greek myth of Jason and the Argonauts is one of the oldest adventure stories ever told. A prince sails to the edge of the known world to steal a magical golden fleece guarded by a dragon that never sleeps. Where does he sail to? Colchis. Colchis is Georgia. And the golden fleece was real. In the mountains of Svaneti, rivers carry fine gold dust washed down from the rock. For thousands of years, locals sank sheepskins into the streams. The wool trapped the gold. Pull it out, let it dry, and it shimmered, a fleece made of gold. Not a myth, a technique. The Greeks saw it, didn't understand it, and called it magic. The Greek geographer Strabo wrote about this exact method, so did Appian, and Georgian geologists say the gold's still there. Same rivers, same rock, 3,000 years later. The greatest myth in Western civilization, the one that basically invented the hero's quest, was a sheep and a river in Georgia. Jason didn't steal magic, he stole technology. And the locals have known this the whole time. They just never bothered correcting anyone. Georgia inspired the world's first adventure story, but what it built with sound, no technology, no instruments, that's the part you'll carry home. Most of the world's old music is monophonic. One voice, one melody, one line. Georgia's traditional music is 3 voices, singing 3 different melodies at the same time. No conductor, no sheet music, no instruments. It's called polyphonic singing. It's so old and so complex that UNESCO gave it special heritage status in 2001. The 3 voices don't blend the way Western harmonies do. They collide. The notes feel off, not wrong, just unfamiliar, like 3 people arguing and agreeing at the same time. Work songs, war songs, healing songs, funeral songs, lullabies that sound like they were written for the baby and the mountain both. And the song NASA put on the Voyager record, Chakrulo, is a table song, meant to be sung at a feast between toasts after the 3rd glass. A song about courage in battle, performed by men who've been drinking wine from a clay pot for 4 hours straight. That's the sound representing Earth to whatever's out there. Not a symphony, not a pop song. 3 Georgian men mid-feast, singing in a tuning system most Western musicians can't even replicate. Georgia's voice reaches past the solar system, but the thing buried in its own soil, the thing older than language, rewrites everything you think you know about being human. In 1991, on the last day of the dig season, trucks already being loaded, an Auntie Justice was clearing a saber-toothed cat skeleton out of the dirt. She kept going anyway. Underneath the cat, a jawbone. It was 1.8 million years old. Dmanisi, a small medieval town. Underneath it, some of the oldest human ancestors ever found outside Africa. 5 skulls, stone tools, animal bones, small brains, simple tools, and somehow they'd walked out of Africa and reached the Caucasus, hundreds of thousands of years earlier than anyone thought possible. Before Dmanisi, the rule was simple. You needed a big brain and good tools to leave Africa. These skulls broke the rule. But here's the part that stuck with me. One of the skulls belonged to an old man who'd lost every tooth years before he died. He couldn't chew, he couldn't hunt. He survived anyway, which means somebody else was feeding him. 1.8 million years ago, before language, before fire, before civilization. Compassion is older than words. Georgia's soil holds the earliest evidence of human kindness. But what Georgia did with its own alphabet, that's a different kind of survival. Georgia has one of only 14 unique alphabets in the world, not borrowed from Greek, not adapted from Latin, not descended from Cyrillic, its own thing entirely. The letters look like they belong in a Studio Ghibli film, round, flowing, elegant, and completely alien if you read English, Arabic, or Chinese. 3 different scripts evolved over the centuries, each as beautiful as the last. Here's the remarkable part. Georgia was invaded by the Mongols, the Persians, the Ottomans, the Russians. In 1978, the Soviets tried to strip Georgian of its status as the country's official language. Russian would have taken its place in schools, in government, on paper. Thousands of Georgians marched in the streets anyway, and won. The law stayed exactly as it was. Georgian stayed the state language, alphabet and all. Every empire that conquered Georgia tried to erase this script one way or another. Every single one failed. It survived invasions, occupations, and 70 years of Soviet rule. Today, its 3 writing systems have their own UNESCO heritage listing. Millions of people still write in a script with no linguistic relatives and no backup plan. Georgia's alphabet isn't just a writing system, it's a grudge match with history, and history keeps losing. So what kind of country sends its songs into space, hides cities inside mountains, and refuses to let anyone rewrite its alphabet? So what is Georgia? A country that buried wine in the ground and waited 8,000 years for the world to catch up. That runs feasts like philosophy lectures and measures inflation in cheese bread. That was founded because a falcon chose the wrong hot spring. A country that inspired the world's first adventure story with a sheep and a river. That carved a secret city into a cliff and named it after a lost child. That sent a drinking song past the edge of the solar system to speak for all of us. Georgia teaches something older. That survival isn't loud, it isn't flashy. It's a clay pot buried in the ground, an alphabet no empire could erase, a jawbone that proves compassion existed before language. There's a Georgian word, gaumarjos. It's a toast. It means, may you be victorious. Georgians say it before every glass, after every speech, at the start of every table. Not cheers, not to your health. May you be victorious. A country that's been conquered by everyone and outlasted them all, chose victory as its greeting. Georgia doesn't survive despite its size. Georgia is still standing because giving up was never really an option. Gaumarjos. Every country has a story, and I'm on a mission to find all 195 of them. If you like this video, hit like and subscribe to join the journey.